This has been a crazy deadline. The most trades in NFL history at the NFL trade deadline. It keeps going up and up and up every single year. The two trades that really stood out, and there were two of them. Bradley Chubb, the linebacker of the Broncos, and a 5th-round draft pick head over there to Miami for Chase Edmonds, a 2023 first round, as well as they need, and a 2024 4th-round draft pick. I think this was a great trade for Miami. They need a pass rusher. They're fighting right now in a division that has a tremendous amount of talent, a tremendous amount of defense, and when they played the Jets a couple of weeks ago, they could not get to Zach Wilson. And that's why the Jets came up as the winners of that game. Bradley Chubb was a big trade. RoQuan Smith was the other one. RoQuan Smith, a star linebacker from the Chicago Bears, heads to the Baltimore Ravens as they just get richer. They gave up linebacker A.J. Klein, a 2023 second-round pick, and a 2023 5th-round pick. I think this was a great trade for the Baltimore Ravens. I was very surprised that Chicago would just trade their best defensive player away for a second-round draft pick. He is still one of the top 3 linebackers in the NFL. He's young. They're definitely going to have the opportunity to re-sign him in the offseason. So I think those are the two trades that really stood out, Speedy. What trades did you like?
Definitely, in terms of the value, the RoQuan Smith one I think was the best value because he's definitely a first-round talent, a linebacker that it took a little while for him to get going for what the 8th overall pick was, but since then he's been very steady and very durable too. I'm going to also look at the other one the Bears traded too, Robert Quinn going to the Eagles too. I think that's a big thing for them. We've seen Howie Roseman love to trade for extra pass rushers in the past, but this is actually a time when they actually need it more because Brandon Graham is older. Derek Barnett is out for the season now, so they don't have the same level of depth that they used to have when it came to all those lethal pass rushes. They still got the interior very strong with Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis in the interior, but they needed the edge help, and I think that ends up being a very sneaky good trade for the Eagles, the undefeated Eagles.
A lot of stars got traded at this trade deadline. Bradley Chubb, RoQuan Smith, Christian McCaffrey, and James Robinson. He's not a star, but he's a great player. He was traded to the Jets for nothing, too, a 6th-round draft pick. Calvin Ridley gets traded all the way from Atlanta.
That's a fascinating
to the Jaguars.
Yep.
Calvin Ridley won't play for the rest of the season, but he is going to be a damn good player next year as they're starting their number 1 wide receiver over there with Jacksonville and a young quarterback. And you have Kirk now and Ridley. I mean, you have a good duo over there.
That's a fascinating one because Atlanta is going to get a 2nd-round pick if Ridley does play like he did in that last season before he had to step away from the mental health, then turned into gambling, obviously. But still, they're going to get a 2nd-round pick out of that. Otherwise, it just becomes a 4th-round pick. So Jacksonville, a team not normally known for getting bargains, will end up getting a bargain if Ridley doesn't play as well, but it's still a steady point in their offense. The other one I like, too, is Jonathan Hankins going to the Cowboys. Helps up their interior. Their edge depth is insane right now, but their interior has been very questionable, and they just get it for just a 6th-round pick. I always liked him as a Giant. He's a veteran guy, and definitely a guy that Dan Quinn can definitely make useful in that defense, which he's done a tremendous job, and probably is going to get a head coaching job next year.
TJ Hockenson goes to Minnesota for a 4th this year and a 2024 conditional 4th-round draft pick. The Minnesota Vikings won this trade.
I think so, too, yeah.
What did the Lions get? A 2nd round?
A 2 and a 3 next year.
It's crazy. Chicago gets their wide receiver and Chase Claypool. Does that help Justin Fields? I don't know. He's not a number 1. I would say Chase is a number 2.
But he's a good counter to Darnell Mooney because he's kind of the opposite skill set. Mooney's a smaller guy that's quick, good deep threat. Claypool's a big guy. Every one of them drafted as a tight end, and it's kind of the opposite. I don't think either of them are number 1 receivers, but they might complement each other well.
What did the New York teams do? Kadarius Toney gets traded from the Giants to Kansas City for 2 2023 picks, 1 a 3rd, and the other one a 6th-round pick. And the Jets got James Robinson a little bit earlier before the trade deadline was over. They got him for a 6th-round draft pick, could be a 5th. And the Jets also traded away Jacob Martin, a very depthful defensive line now. You have Jermaine Johnson coming back this week. They didn't need Jacob Martin, who was played pretty well for the Jets in their defense. He gets traded to his hometown in Denver. The Jets also trade away a 2024 5th-round draft pick for the Broncos 2024 4th-round draft pick. A lot of the other trades, they were just add-ons. Nothing really that stood out. Might change a team. Robbie Anderson gets traded to the Cardinals by the Panthers for a 6th and a 7th. That doesn't mean anything. Justin Herron gets traded to the Patriots from the lonely Raiders. Nothing else that I saw really stuck out.
The only other one that's kind of interesting, William Jackson goes to the Steelers. Been a pretty good corner in the past with the Bengals. That was a move I thought Minnesota should have definitely tried to pull the trigger on. Even though it's a big contract, they need an outside outside corner like that if they're going to want to do well in the playoffs this year, because the rest of their defense is pretty much set. I know they had an injury with the rookie safety Scene at the beginning of the year, but still, the rest of their defense has been strong, especially against the run too, but they really need some corner help, especially in a passing league.
So why don't we get into our 3-for-all picks of the week?
We'll start with the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. The over-under for this one is 49.5. This is going to be a tight one. Both these teams have had issues in the red zone so far. You mentioned Kenneth Walker in the last segment running the ball very well. I think he'll do so again against the Cardinals, who have trouble against the run. But the Cardinals' pass defense and their pass rush has actually been pretty good this year. We've seen them contain a lot of top receivers, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp this year. I think they'll be able to do that to one of those receivers. And offensively, Kyler Murray, I think, has a big game in this one. Seattle's had trouble with running quarterbacks this year. The Cardinals need this game. I'll take them on the under.
Can you say Geno Smith, baby? Absolutely. I'm taking Seattle in this game. You were talking about Kenneth Walker. You're talking about this defense. You have the offensive rookie of the month. You have the defensive rookie of the month in Woolen. There's nothing bad to say about this, and Pete Carroll could be coach of the year. Everything they're pulling, it's really working. The offensive line's been fantastic. DK Metcalf is back. He's catching the ball. Tyler Lockett, if he doesn't fumble the ball, he's catching the ball. And Geno Smith has been fantastic. I think Seattle's going to go into Arizona. I think they're one of the better teams in the NFC, and they're going to shock everybody and knock off the Cardinals. Give me the Seattle Seahawks on the over.
All right, next game, the LA Rams at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Pretty much season on the line for both of these teams. 42.5, the over-under for this one. I'm going to take the Rams in this one because they've had the edge when it comes to Sean McVay's offense versus Todd Bowles' defense for a while. Tampa won one matchup in 2019. That was a wacky game. It was like 48-34 or something like that. But beyond that, they've owned the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers losing Shaq Barrett for the year, that's going to hurt their defense. Their defense has not been the same since the Chiefs game. I think offensively, they'll be able to take advantage of that. So I'm going to take the Rams on the over in this one.
Oh, I have the Rams too. I don't know what's going on with Tampa Bay. Tom Brady's not the same quarterback. He doesn't have much of a life anymore. You don't have kids. I'm just kidding. I feel bad for Tom Brady. I really do. He decides to come back and play football with Todd Bowles and that lonely Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, and they might not even make the playoffs this year, and he's going to ride off into the sunset for maybe the first time he's never made the playoffs. It's crazy.
I think since his second year in the league.
This is a guy that's been consistently in the playoffs and might not make the playoffs this year. It's remarkable. But yeah, I got the Rams in this game. I think they're the better team. I think they have the better offense right now, even though Matthew Stafford can't throw a deep throw. So I got the Rams on the over as well.
All right, the last game, Kirk Cousins return to Washington. The Minnesota Vikings and the Washington Commanders. The over-under for this one is 43.5. And Kirk Cousins is going to have to play well because Washington's done a nice job stopping the run this year. Kevin O'Connell's been a guy that's been an efficient running scheme, but not really an overly loaded running scheme with Cook and Madison. So I think they're going to throw the ball a lot. I think Cousins does play well in this game, and I think losing William Jackson, they'll be able to spread the ball around more. I think both Thielen and Osborne get more involved in this offense too. TJ Hawkinson, I think it'll take a week for him to get into this system, a very complicated system, but he's going to be impactful as a blocker too because Chase Young's coming back as well. So I'm going to take the Vikings in this one. Cousins gets his revenge on his former team. I'll take them on the over.
There is a player coming back from injury, Mr. Pass Rusher himself. I think the Washington Commanders at home, Taylor Heinicke, I think they're going to go in at home and shut everybody up. I think Minnesota's a lot more overrated than people think. Chase Young coming back, Taylor Heinicke playing the way he is, and Terry McLaurin and Gibson. They just have a tremendous amount of offense, and their defense has played pretty well in the last couple of weeks as well, ever since Taylor Heinicke has taken over as the quarterback of this team. I do believe this will be the end of Carson Wentz. I think they should just ride with Taylor Heinicke and see what he is and see what this team is. I'm going to take the Commanders on the under.
Just in that defense, huh?
I'm going to pick the opposites this week and see where they fall. I really think the way football has been this year, there's been a lot of upsets, and I still think the Minnesota Vikings are one of the more overrated teams in the NFL, especially the way they've played the last couple of weeks. One sport that's going on where there are no New York teams in it, it's the World Series.
Just 3 ex-Met pitchers, that's it.
There you go. Noah Syndergaard, Zach Wheeler.
Rafael Montero.
That's right. 3 top prospects for the New York Mets. One from one team could win the World Series, and the other 2 can win the World Series on the other side. So 3 players could win a World Series. It's crazy, but that's baseball. Nothing is guaranteed in baseball, that's for sure. But why don't we get into it? I've watched this series, and there's a lot to talk about. Game number 1, when Verlander had a 5-0 lead, and somehow the Philadelphia Phillies came back. I don't know what happened to the pitching, but it didn't exist. McCullers gave up the most home runs as a starting pitcher in a World Series, and then then you saw the Philadelphia Phillies take a 2-1 lead. And then the last two games after that, they were the Stros. The Stros took control of this series, and they're getting timely pitching from Verlander and their young pitching. And this bullpen is pretty stout. The no-hitter the other day, they've been unbelievable. And now they're going back into enemy territory in Houston, where the fans are loud and crazy and cheating. I'm just kidding.
Fans are cheating now, too? Oh, boy.
I don't know. Maybe they're shooting hot dogs out of their buns and telling them what strike and what ball's coming out of the pitcher's hand. But Philadelphia's in a lot of trouble, and they have to depend on their ace to go out there, even hurt, and try to win that baseball game. If they do that, they take it to a Game 7, and anything could happen.
Before I get to Game 6, Noah Syndergaard, I'm glad you got to witness a combined no-hitter in person against your own team after the comments you made about my New York Mets earlier in the season, saying that was fraudulent. Now you got to witness one in person in Game 4 of the World Series. But yeah, that was a masterclass by that bullpen. Christian Javier as a starter was fantastic.
He's their best pitcher, by the way.
They've gotten a lot more depth out of that bullpen, even in comparison to their other World Series teams in the past, too. A lot of the bullpens were rocky. They had to use starters out of the bullpen a lot of the time, too, or versatile guys. That's how McCullers really emerged. But now with Game 6, it's going to be a big battle for Zach Wheeler. Now he's dealing with some arm fatigue. We saw Max Scherzer have an issue with that last year when he was with the Dodgers, and plenty of other pitchers recently, especially older pitchers that have had this kind of issue. So that's going to be a big test for Zach Wheeler. It might have to change his pitching style in order to make sure he can go longer in the games. And Rob Thompson's got to be ready for a backup plan in that case. It's actually, I guess, good that they announced
he has a fresh bullpen.
He does. With the off day that it'll end up helping. And this bullpen's actually been very impressive in this series so far. It really hasn't been a major deficiency at any point. David Robertson's had a couple rocky innings, but beyond that, you look at a Phillies bullpen that never was the strength of their team, is looking very deep. And their defense, their position player defense, has actually been really good this series as well. It's just the Astros have also made some insane plays too. We saw Chas McCormick, Trey Mancini make some great plays in Game 5, and two pitching master classes going at it.
Right now, the better hitting team is Philadelphia, but not by much. And both teams have timely pitching. They've both pitched very, very well in this series. And who knows? Anything's possible. Anything could happen. And a lot of people think Philadelphia is done. My uncle thinks Philadelphia is done. I don't believe so. If somehow Wheeler can come out the winner of this game, it's going to a Game 7. If it goes to a Game 7, any possible thing could happen.
You're going to see a battle of depth from both ways. I think we're going to see young pitchers with the Astros because they're not really big length guys. Both Valdez. I don't know if Javier will be available. Maybe.
I would love to see a Game 7.
The Phillies are going to do that too because they're going to have to pitch Wheeler to save their season, and they're going to have to go with something else when it comes to either starting Suarez or Gibson. There's a lot of options they could go to, and then they're going to play a bullpen game too. So expect that if there is a Game 7.
It's going to be really, really fun. And then there's this whole Aaron Judge thing, and we're waiting for Aaron Judge to be announced as the MVP of the league. We know he is, and we all know Paul Goldschmidt in the National League is going to be the MVP. But this story is going to blow up. After this series is over, the big story is where Aaron Judge is going to go. Is he staying with the Yankees? Is he going to San Francisco? Is he going to the Red Sox? Or is he going to the Dodgers or the Mets? I really believe he's going to San Francisco. You've heard what Brian Cashman has said. He's going to be very aggressive for Aaron Judge. The Yankees have said over the last couple of years is that Aaron Judge can't stay healthy. The last 2 years, he has been healthy. But the years before that, the guy would miss 30 games. That doesn't hold up when you're paying a guy over $300 million and he wants a 7-8 year contract. I think the Yankees could be making a very big mistake if they sign Aaron Judge to anything more than a 5-year deal. Now, if you can get him for 5 years and $50 million a year, I do it. But anything more than 5 or 6 years, I think it's ridiculous. And I think the Mets are going to stay back on this. They don't need Aaron Judge in that lineup. I know he's a big name. I know he's a big bopper. I know he could protect Pete Alonso. Could you imagine him and Pete Alonso in the same lineup? But I do not see Uncle Stevie going after this. I think Uncle Stevie will go after another arm if they lose Bassett, and I think they'll go after timely hitters. Have a little bit of power, but not that much power that you could put in the middle of the lineup and give you some pop.
First of all, with Aaron Judge, yeah, it's a very unique situation because we've never seen a player this big, 6'7", 280 pounds, do what he does in the outfield, too. Most of those big, strong guys are designated hitters, first basemen, and they're more durable because they're not doing all those things. Aaron Judge plays great defense in center field. He steals bases. He scores runs. He runs the bases very well. That's going to be a big thing to a team that's going to have to get that kind of investment because you're getting a player that is being forced to do things that are out of the norm of his body type, really. We've seen that in the NFL all the time with a lot of tight ends that are really big, and a lot of them have injury issues throughout their career. Look at somebody like Gronk, Tyler Eifert, guys like that. Those big stocky guys that really have issues with that. So that's going to be a big gamble for any team to do that. I definitely don't want the Mets to do it just because I think the Mets approach has to be a little different this offseason. I think they realize that this old school identity thing is not going to necessarily work as a long-term thing. We saw both Scherzer and DeGrom kind of wear down towards the end of the year. Whether they were pitching hurt in the playoffs or not was another story, but either way, they mismanage it. So get some guys that are younger, get some guys that are tradable contracts, guys that are controllable through arbitration that they could have for a while. Get some depth in that bullpen, too. They have one lefty, and that's Joely Rodriguez, who was horrible this year.